Hello and welcome to News Express, exclusively brought to you by Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. I am Chukunonso Modi. Let's take a look at the stories hitting the front page this week. Now, the big story, which says Nigeria under pressure of a global energy transition, says McKinsey. Now, another big story, Africa needs new strategies amid food, economic, climate crisis. This is OBG report. SARB headline says food demand to grow 55% by 2030. World Bank. 85% of food now imported, UNCTAD. Another sub-headline, smallholders' productivity needs energy. You should definitely check out Finance and Investment, which says Tokia LCFE Rev Commodities Ecosystem, Technology and Innovation 2, Think Digital, Commodities and Agriculture, with headline is Security Keeps Foreigners Away, Executive Knowledge Series, which says of supply chains and the next pandemic, and definitely look out for visionary voices with articles surviving a future of extreme heat. Now let's bring in Philip Isakba, the publisher Business AM, to help us make sense of the headlines. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, Nonso. Had an interesting week. I hope you never can have holiday, can you?
Yeah, true. You never can. Okay, let's get right into it. The first one says Nigeria under pressure of a global energy transition, says McKinsey. Now, a new report from global consulting firm McKinsey and Company says Nigeria, along with other African oil and gas producing countries, are under mounting pressures over a global energy transition that is at once in acceleration. Mr. Philip, what are these pressures?
A lot of things have been happening since the decision to really tackle the global climate crisis got into serious gear. And we've seen a raft of decisions being taken across the globe, with regards to what you call the transition, to a net zero climate situation for the world. And quite a lot of what we see as contributing to the depletion of the ozone layer, particularly the heat wave that the world is trying to avoid, is down to activities in the fossil fuel or fossil fossil fuel people who are in the oil and gas industry.
Right.
And because of a lot of things that have a lot of decisions being taken, so this report is zeroing in on how those decisions are beginning to have some pressures in terms of because this country's Nigeria in particular, has a lot of its revenues tied to activities in the oil and gas sector. If globally people are trying to move in one direction, and then in Nigeria, there's still a lot being done with regards to trying to ensure that we still mine the activities in the oil and gas sector continues to be up, so that we can continue to get some revenues. This is what the pressure that they are really talking about, So it's a thin line, How do you get into the groove, so to speak, of what's going on around the world, So it's about the energy transition. How do you get on the train, but still be able to continue to earn some income because you are tied to, because your economy, your activities, your spending, is tied to the activities in the oil and gas sector. So for Nigeria, for some other, particularly African countries, because this is a report that is dedicated or zeroing in on the future of African oil and gas, so called positioning for the energy transition, So there's quite a lot of pressure, with as far as this is concerned. Nigeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, South Sudan, Ghana, Libya, Algeria, and all the others, because they are exposed, the economies are exposed to resources in the revenues, so to speak, from the oil and gas sector. Not just that, there's so many other things, because as the world continues to pursue this energy transition, you find that the activities in the local energy space in the country will begin to reduce, because a lot of the funding, not just funding, but the technology, we've talked about this nonso before, the technology that is used in the oil and gas sector is foreign, it's foreign, and the international oil and gas companies are reducing their investment in this area, in oil and gas, because of the pressure that they are getting from even their investors, who are saying they're no longer putting money in this what's it called, in oil and gas, except the oil and gas companies are doing things that will reduce the effect of their activities on climate change. So because of that, we're seeing that the pressure is mounting with regards to how much is it that the oil and gas sector in these African economies, particularly Nigeria, can continue to contribute. There's a statistic that suggests that currently you have what's it called, energy transition. We see Africa's crude and condensate production fall from 6.5 million barrels per day, currently, to 2.5 million barrels per day by 2024. That are naturally the what's it called, the investors will begin to pull back. They're already pulling back. We're hearing ExxonMobil pulling back, although that's on hold because government, we understand, didn't give its consent. We are seeing Shell about to pull back. We understand Hess Oil and Gas is having last-minute discussions with Shell to take over its assets. But we're seeing this pullback. Will there be enough funding, enough funds locally, domestically to go into those assets and still mine those assets to produce as we currently have, And then when you get to the international oil and gas space, they're telling you, a lot of countries have taken decisions, France, the United Kingdom, and many others, Spain and the rest of them, about pulling back, in terms of consumption of fossil fuel products, So that's the pressure. The pressure is mounting, is building, but so there's a lot of they've looked at this, and they think that there's danger ahead, but how can Nigeria, position for the energy transition, that is already in flight, So these are the things that they're talking about. For instance, look at this statistic. Demand for refined petroleum products is currently at around 4.1 million barrels per day. Is projected to reach 5.3 million barrels per day by 2040. Now, what we're hearing from this report is that there's still a lot of demand domestically, because population is increasing, for energy, and because there's still this huge demand, you find that investment is not going to continue to go in there, to be able to meet this demand. So if it's rising from 4.1 million barrels per day, to 5.3 million barrels per day because of population, because of other factors, so it's already, the sign is there, that there's going to be a lot of pressure, and that this pressure is going to challenge policy and decision makers, or to respond in the appropriate way, that can help deal with the situation, So It said there's a part of it that said the demand-induced pressure on Nigeria and other African producers will be an outcome of rapid population growth and industrialization, which are expected to drive energy demand growth across the entire African continent. So these are the pressure that are mounting, and all this is as a result of this issue around what's it called, the transition, energy transition. Transiting from what currently is now to move towards a net zero situation, because there's an alarm across the world, of the danger that humanity, the humans face, if they do not do anything about this. Remember, what they're trying to pull back. The intensity of the heat is such that temperatures, they want to keep temperatures at 1.5 degrees centigrade, and it's a Herculean task. That is the level at which human existence can still be tolerable, and because anything more than that, puts mankind and womankind in jeopardy, and that's what everybody is trying to avoid. Recall that last year there was a COP 26, there's another COP 27 coming up, and people are still talking about how this problem can be solved. And this is what this report is trying to put across, about how that everything being done around getting to net zero, or reducing the greenhouse emission, or making sure that the climate change problem doesn't escalate, how much pressure that is putting on the African continent, particularly Nigeria and a few other countries that are dependent on activities in the fossil fuel industry, oil and gas industry, because their revenues are tied to the sector, because their foreign exchange earning tied to the sector, and everything is suggesting that there's a pullback, from by the international community, from encouraging continuous investment in that area, and then continuous demand, from what products come from the sector, So that's the pressure that this is all about.
Like you said earlier, this decision is not just, the pressure is not just coming. It's not just coming from this economy is being highly dependent on oil and gas revenue. That's one thing, especially Nigeria is so dependent on. I know we have mentioned this over and over again of how we have so many other places to branch into, but then we're still there. And it doesn't help that Nigeria and other producers on the continent have reserves that cost more to produce, and then on average more carbon intensive than oil and gas from other regions. But now this report has spoken on the pressures and what it is causing. It also provides solutions as well. What are these solutions, Mr. Philip?
They have looked at a good number of reasons. I think perhaps we have saved that for another angle of the story, but they have looked at quite a number of things that the what's it called, that needs to be done. Here we have highlighted the main problems. Yes. I think if you will find that what they have suggested is to look at those issues that have been highlighted, and then begin to really tackle them. Yes. I think tackle them so that they can resolve them. Again, it's about being better prepared. You have a situation where they talk about population growth. They talk about industrialization. They have suggested that they need to key into what's going on globally, to be able to understand, how to respond adequately to to the different issues that have been raised. Revenues. Countries depend. Some countries, Nigeria in particular, it depends quite a lot on this. Again, one key issue, right, is that the transition is not to say the energy that the world needs. I think because the energy that the world needs seems to come a lot from fossil fuel presently. The transition is to go renewable. And so there's one suggestion about investing in renewable energy projects, to generate new revenue streams. You understand? So for Nigeria, for instance, that is highly dependent in terms of its revenue, for its revenue on crude oil and the fossil fuel industry. One suggestion is for them to invest in renewable energy. And we have talked about this, I believe, in the past, where we talked about the amount of sunshine, that the country, that is prevalent in Africa, particularly, in Nigeria, and how government has not been particularly focused on harnessing the enormous energy resources, renewable energy resources that they can get from solar, from hydro, from hydro and the rest of them, so that would be one area, not just in terms of how beneficial it is to the country, in terms of how the citizens or the people benefit from it, but also in terms of how it becomes a revenue generating sector. Not much attention has been paid to that. So generally they talk about creating an enabling environment to stimulate investment. So that's one part of it. That the African continent, or Nigeria in particular, that we are concerned about. Because it's where we are domiciled. That we are able to create the environment that stimulates investment into renewables, for instance. And because there are so many renewable projects that are looking for investment capital. So it's policymakers, policymakers and decision makers of government would be have been asked to look at this carefully. And then the other one is access. Available capital pools. Because because as the world is gravitating in the direction of reducing dependence on fossil fuel, as the campaign is going on, there are also a lot of capital pools that have been created, for this. We've heard the president of the African Development Bank, occasionally raise concerns about how the world, wants Africa to focus on, to join the race of this transition, but hasn't provided met the promise. We've heard of promises that were made to the tune of $100 billion. I think that would be $100 billion yearly, to support this transition for Africa, that haven't come, and then Akinwumi additional, the president of the African Development Bank has raised a lot of has had cause to raise a lot of issues regarding that and challenge the international community, to deal with this. One of the suggestions is to access available capital pools.
Yes.
Be deliberate about it. Be focused on have your focus on it. To be able to do this. Investment in renewable energy has increased tenfold in Africa over the past decades. From 5 billion. Between 2000 and 2009, to around 55 billion. You wouldn't believe it. So that's quite a lot. From 5 billion in the 10 years of 2010 to 2020 and 2029, and then to 55 billion between 2010 and 2020. That's some 70%, of increase, and so 70% of this amount, they said, was destined for Southern and North Africa. Not West Africa, not the giant of Africa, giant in size in the economy, Nigeria, but to Southern and Northern Africa or North Africa. So you can see that a lot is being done in this space in this renewable space in Southern Africa and in North Africa. I think it was Egypt the other time that we learned was building one of the biggest solar panel in the world. So a lot is being done. We could take another time, to
look more into this.
Look more into this because there were a lot of projects that were going on in Kano, that did not get. Whether they got off the ground, whether they were just for photo ops,
we don't know.
But nothing came out of them. But I think Nigeria hasn't really devoted the attention that this matter requires.
Yes, I do agree with you on that. Now let's go quickly to the second headline, which says Africa needs new strategies amid food, economic, climate crisis, OBG report. Now, a new focus report on Africa's agriculture presented by the Oxford Business Group, which is a business intelligence and consultancy firm, has said that Africa's agriculture, although has the biggest potential in the world, requires new strategies to face food, economic and climate challenges. And if you ask me, Mr. Philip, they are not wrong in making this statement because there's a whole lot that's been going on recently.
This is the biggest issue, and the truth is that there hasn't been the kind of attention that it deserves, being paid to it. There's a food crisis, there's a food crisis that has been brought about by different issues, so the food crisis is such that even though Africa continues to be looked at as a virgin continent with regards to food production, because it hasn't even scratched the surface when it comes to its food production. It hasn't even come to a strategic approach, It hasn't put down serious strategic strategies, to really harness the potential with regards to food production. This is a continent that you have a large swath of its space, not cultivated enough, for food production. It hasn't really looked at, even examined its climate in terms of how different parts of its climate can produce different type of food. It's been concluded that it can feed itself enough cooperation amongst the African countries, and there's a deliberate effort, to bring this about, So this is. And then this has been exposed quite frankly by the trouble that we have found in Russia and Ukraine. The crisis has exposed quite a lot of things. It has brought out a lot of stories with regards to the dependence of Africa and African countries in particular, to that axis of the world, to the north, with regards to food. You have countries, that, for instance, Egypt, that depends largely, that eats a lot of what's called wheat-related products, pastry-related products, that entirely depends on Ukraine and Russia, for its supplies. And for decades, it has been like that. It has not moved an inch. It has not done to find out what alternatives there are, what you can do. So there's a food crisis, and this is actually opening the eyes of people, to seeing that beyond just the surface look at this matter, there is there is a serious problem. 85% of food now imported. This is 85% of food now imported. Food expected. That's UNCTAD, saying that, food demand to grow 55% by 2030. That's the World Bank, But the strategy has remained, smallholders in Africa, smallholders farmer or smallholders farming, largely across the length and breadth of the continent. And they are saying this strategy will not
work.
Help, it will not work, given what is going on at the moment, So it's not just the economic side of it, which is affecting agriculture. There's a story in the paper today that said, I said 98%, foreign direct investment was down 98% for Nigeria in agriculture. We're not talking about low. In agriculture, down, I think, 98% or so. So that, of course, they said that's for security reasons, So you have that, you have economic issues, then you have the climate crisis, that we have in currently going on, that is affecting quite a lot of things, and this is affecting food production. And food production, you need food to continue to exist on this planet. Otherwise, you find yourself.
Gone.
Gone. So increasing production will not be possible, the report says, without increasing productivity, and that productivity is tied to the strategy of just having smallholder farming, take place all over the place, So the report has provided some
solutions.
Some solutions that the decision makers and policy makers need to look at.
I like that you said that this challenge of food security is not just it did not just start today, because I was having this talk with someone, and most of them felt that this war between Ukraine and Russia, made it worse. But then this war, like you mentioned, you rightfully said, just exposed that we are so dependent on imports. 85% is a lot. If we're importing even down to toothpick, that's so much in Nigeria, talk more of other African countries. And honestly, if we start this topic, I don't think we can exhaust all areas of it within this time frame that we have.
We cannot. The Ukraine crisis only exposed it.
Yes.
Not that it has always been there. It just goes to show that sometimes you can get into the euphoria of something, and you don't know where the pain is coming from.
Yes,
because you're in this euphoric moment, and until they take that euphoria away, you won't know where it's hitting you. So the war only just exposed how much we have been dependent on outsiders to feed ourselves.
I love reports like this, both the first headline and second. They are exposing, bringing to light so people see what is going on, and then you also understand what is happening around you. So I should say thank you to Business AM for bringing this up for us to see.
Thank you. That's what we do.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Philip, for today. Sure, we'll see how the stories develop this week.
Absolutely. Have a great week ahead.
You too. That was Philip Isakwa, the publisher, Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. Don't forget that you can also listen in by going to www.africabusinessradio.com and clicking on the News Express podcast. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more.